just about 5 weeks after I had been in the temple, first time I had come, I say to this one man, I want to be initiated. And this other man wanted to also see Prabhupada. So we went to try to come into the United States. And what happened was, they rejected us at the border because he was a Colombian citizen. So we had to return. Then the next week, Prabhupada was not in Boston, he was in Buffalo, New York. And I said, I want to see Prabhupada now. And I asked Hansa Duda, the president at the time, Jai Pataka, Gopal Krishna, these are just the normal devotees in this temple. And Himavati, his wife, Hansa Duda's wife, she was also always engaging me in the kitchen, like a Mataji for me. At any rate, I wanted to go again. So this time Nanda Kishore, who hadn't received his second initiation, wanted to get his second initiation. We had no money, we were impoverished, living in Canada, basically very little money, and very little spiritual or Sankirtan activities in the way to make money for the temple. Everyone worked, had a job, and maintained that way. But I asked again, can I go this time? So this time Krishna would grant me with no money practically. We got out in the middle of the Montreal March, early March, snow everywhere, and the hope to see Prabhupada in Buffalo. And Nanda Kishore and I somehow got on the road, put up our fingers, someone immediately picked us up and took us halfway. And we weren't there maybe 2 minutes more, and all of a sudden someone else picked us up and brought us right into Toronto. There we took a little bus for a little money we had. We took a bus. Then where the bus was just shot past the temple, and Nanda Kishore says, there's the temple, and we had shot about a half a block past it, and we came running back with our stuff. And the devotees were outside the temple in this little house in Buffalo. And just then, for the first time, I felt great excitement and anticipation, but also I felt this fear that I've had all the time about the Swami, this grave personality that I looked in his eyes, I would get scared. I said, I better get back to work. Anyway, so, because I was very deathly afraid. So finally, I look away from the temple of devotees, and then this car pulled up. And there, for the first time, I saw physically Srila Prabhupada. And I saw his face, and like a thing like this from the side. And he looked. And I looked, and I go, that's Prabhupada. Nanda Kishore and I we were in towards the curb. We fell at his feet as he crossed the street. He came by, and he put his hand on my head, and he put his hand on Nanda Kishore's head, and he walked in the temple. So after Srila Prabhupada left, the next day I had the opportunity to, the new initiates, who were myself, Trivikram, and Saranandini, were to be initiated the very next day. So after that night I was very ecstatic, and all my fears seemed to be dissipating. As I felt Prabhupada's presence, it wasn't at all what I had imagined. He was very sweet, gentle, kind, very strong. But that was just one aspect of him, and it seemed that's the aspect that, because of my sinfulness, I felt that that's the aspect that's really hid in my heart. His sternness, his severity, his austerity, his dedication to Krishna, his heaviness as a guru, which is true. So the very next day, the initiation was scheduled for that Saturday. I think it was the 19th of April, 1969. That's when Srila Prabhupada was in Buffalo. And so they told me, Chitsukhananda, you can go see Prabhupada. He's in his apartment. He was staying at Rupanuga's apartment. Brahmananda was there. And Nanda Kishore and I went there. Nanda Kishore introduced me to Prabhupada. He says, oh, this is Charles. I was going to say, anyway, he says, oh, very nice. Do you like this movement? And I said, yes, I like it very much. He says, you're happy? He says, oh, very happy. I met this movement. Thank you, Prabhupada. And I'm very happy to meet you. He says, oh, thank you. So he's very humble, sweet, kind. He felt like an old lost relative, like an old lost grandfather or grandshire from the ages. But I didn't feel strange in his presence. I felt very comfortable. All these fears that I had were just like, they disappeared completely, and I sat with him and I felt so happy. I felt so peaceful. And I had a guitar with me, and he asked me if I would sing and am I chanting Hare Krishna. And it's something that followed me throughout all our times, because actually even in Mexico, when we went to open the temple in Mexico, we would have these guitar kirtans. in Prabhupada's presence. And he would say, yes, yes, more. This is what's making people dance and chant. Use it for Krishna. Now guitars, we've become so Bengaliized or Indianized. It's nice to hear the sitar, it's nice to hear the tambura. But it's also nice, people in their own instruments, in their own lands, in their own nations, to worship God. And that's what Srila Prabhupada was always very open-minded in that respect. There's no hard and fast rules for chanting, and he tried to accommodate everyone. I had written to Prabhupada when I was in Vancouver that after living brahmachari life for so many months, I thought that best that I get married. And he thought, well, I don't have the letter, that's the only letter I don't have. But in this letter, Srila Prabhupada instructs me, he says, it's nice that you have taken to Krishna consciousness and that you want to get married. I'm not against that. We want to have nice devotee marriages and devotee children. And I said, oh, that's wonderful. And he says, but one thing, he says, you must marry, find out a girl from our society. Make sure she's a devotee. Otherwise, your life, I have seen when they marry who are not devotees, their life is not happy because they don't understand. So therefore, make sure you find out a girl from our society. Okay, and when you come to Rath Yatra, we will discuss this personally. So Srila Prabhupada was paying, even though I thought he had not remembered me from Buffalo and that little, he had never forgotten me. At that time, I didn't know where my service would be, but on one occasion we went down to spend some time with Prabhupada. We were trying to open a Berkeley temple. And I mean, Hansadura and myself and a few other devotees from the Bay Area. And it wasn't until one day that I thought maybe Prabhupada had forgotten me because he didn't mention anything Rath Yatra, but naturally, the back of my mind I was thinking there's more important things. We should think about Rath Yatra, not thinking about my own personal arrangements. But there, when I came to Los Angeles one day, we were all sitting there doing our Harinam and then came back on a Sunday. And it was a Sunday feast and the whole temple was filled with devotees. Just literally. And Prabhupada had this little room, like light-colored purple room with a picture of Vaikuntha planets, I remember. And all of a sudden, someone came out from the feast while we were all eating and said, Chitsukhananda? Yes? Prabhupada wants to see you. I went, me? Washed my hands, my mouth, and ran into the room. I said, yes, Srila Prabhupada. And all the devotees were stunned. Who is this little new devotee that Prabhupada is inviting? He says, oh, remember you had written me a letter and you had discussed marriage? I have found one girl for you. And I go, oh. He says, oh, but, he says, there will be many obstacles for you. It'll be difficult. But you must learn to tolerate. And I said, who is this girl, Srila Prabhupada? And he goes, Chandra Bali. And I had heard about her and knew of her and seen a little bit of her, and I go, and he saw my eyes roll in my head and go, uh-oh. And literally, I remember Tamal Krishna was sitting next to Prabhupada, and they began to laugh, and I began to get more bewildered as they laughed harder. I felt I didn't know what. Because I had known that she was very rebellious. She used to go to Prabhupada's room, try to break into Prabhupada's room at 4 in the morning, 3 in the morning, leave the ashram and just go there and discuss things with Prabhupada personally, how women's rights should be paid more attention to, which I'm in favor for, by the way. So, and I don't mean that sarcastically, we want rights for everyone. That's what this movement's about. Anyway, so he said, yes, call her, and I will marry you here. I said, oh boy, I was wondering, and then I said, yes, Prabhupada, I accept. Then immediately all enthusiastic, young Brahma call up on the phone, and I go, hello, is Chandrabali there? And there was a Sunday feast oh yes, hold on please. And she said, yes, who is this? I said, oh, this is Chitsukhananda. You know me, I'm a Sankirtan devotee from Berkeley, and I'm down here in Los Angeles now. It says, anyway, Srila Prabhupada wants, I offered, he wants that we should get married, and he's going to make the arrangement. And she goes, yuck, with you? And I go, huh? Prabhupada, he and I never heard of anyone saying no to Prabhupada. And she was saying, oh no, oh wait a second. All of a sudden, I heard the phone hang up and I went, oh my goodness. So I went back. I didn't want to go back into Prabhupada. I was too embarrassed, but I told the servant of Prabhupada, I said, no, she doesn't want to marry me. And Prabhupada heard about it. He goes, that's okay. So now that I had been writing to Srila Prabhupada, I had to give him a report. Just before I did write to him, I remember the third day there I was staying in this like hotel, this very simple place, kind of a rough neighborhood, weird neighborhood. But I asked someone, what do people watch on television? What is the main show? And they said, 24 Hours with Jacobo Zabludovsky, nice Jewish man in Mexico. He's the #1 MC, newscaster. He's the #1 guy. And practically, he's respected in the whole world. But anyway, that's something else. I don't mind glorifying because what he did was wonderful. I went there to the station by myself and about 9 o'clock at night. The show goes on around 10. And I went right to the television stations outside, downstairs. And I wrote this little note saying, please, Mr. Zabludovsky, give me a chance to explain our mission here. Sure enough, the policeman came and escorted me upstairs, and I had a little discussion with him. And he said, so what are you doing here? And he says, I'm going to ask you the same thing. I'm going to put you on TV tonight. And I asked him, well, actually, I knew that the show, from what I had heard, the show was watched by millions, literally millions. This is where the whole center of attention was in Mexico at night, watching 24 Hours with Jacobo Zabludovsky. Anyway, so once we got on the show, he asked me, what is this? And I explained to him that our mission was to bring happiness to the Mexican people. They're already joyful people, but we've come to give them even more happiness by the grace of my spiritual master, His Divine Grace. And I showed a picture of Prabhupada, and it was wonderful. Before I left the show, I said, you know what I tell him? I asked Mr. Zabludovsky, I said, I have the hope someday that my spiritual master will come to Mexico. When he comes, please, let him come on the show. And he looked at me and he says, fair enough, he can come. So after this, I wrote to Srila Prabhupada, told him about the success we were having little by little. First few months were a little rough. I arrived there June 2nd, 1970. Prabhupada arrived there June 1st, 1971. He had planned to stay 5 or 6 days. So in those 5 or 6 days, I had programs and had a whole itinerary of activities. So the first day was the Mason Temple, the Masonic Temple down in Mexico City. And we went to that engagement. Prabhupada was cordial, beautiful, kind as always, and just like people were wanting his autograph or melting away in his presence everywhere we went. So he would walk through the street to his car and out, and I don't remember so much exactly about the instructions in the lecture, but I do remember we came back to the temple. It must have been around 9:30, 10 o'clock. And then I asked Srila Prabhupada, you're very tired? He said, no. I said, well, you've been traveling all day and fasting, because basically he didn't really eat much, just took a little fruit. Yeah. And then I said, Srila Prabhupada, I want to ask you something. What is your opinion? I don't want to take advantage of you and your presence here, but actually there's an opportunity to go to the television station tonight with this very important MC, Mr. Zabludovsky, and he has a very important program that millions and millions, he says, millions? Watch? I said, how many millions? I said, many millions probably, 20 million, 34, I don't know, many millions. He says, oh? He says, then we must go. Prabhupada, it's very late. I feel very bad even to even mention it. I'm taking advantage of your health. And he didn't care for his health. He came to give everything. I said, Srila Prabhupada, but it's very late at night. He says, so what? He says, we'll work tonight and sleep tomorrow. He told me just like that. Sleep tomorrow, work tonight and sleep tomorrow. I go, okay. All right, let's go. So sure enough, we went to the show. They presented Srila Prabhupada. We had to wait a little while. We got a little too ecstatic. We brought his Vyasas on. from the temple, a big marble, Vyasa-san. We put it right on the stage. And Mr. Zabludowski was there, and then we sat around Srila Prabhupada. We wanted him to look. And then they're accustomed to popes and bishops, and why not Swami Prabhupada in this beautiful chair. So Jacobo asked him some things. I remember basically that he said, so you've come to our country, and what is your message? He says, my message is only a message of joy for all this world, for all your country. That everyone should be peaceful, that everyone should be happy, and not be misled. And he says, how can they do that? He says, well, the main thing is you have to be in harmony with God. And he said, by chanting you'll find. So many nice instructions he gave. And we chanted, and Prabhupada then went into the commercial, and we got Vyasa-san ready, and then I went to thank Mr. Sabludowski personally. But I noticed that his head was in his hands, and he was like this, noticeably shaken by Prabhupada's association. I said, thank you very much. I could tell his mood was like very somber and quiet. And he goes, no, thank you. I said, thank you. So we went off. So I remember I was just sitting around like a little puppy always. Wherever he went, I would go not too far away, and he'd look at me and say, there's my little puppy there. But he didn't seem to mind. In fact, I remember eating with Shamsundar next. I was eating mangoes, and I was so much in ecstasy watching Prabhupada eating fruit. He says, just fruit. He says, if we eat just fruit, we can never overeat. I remember him saying that. That's in his. He says, if you eat fruit, you will never overeat. So we were eating their mangoes there, and of course I was inexperienced in the way that a mango should be properly eaten, not over your dhoti and have it all drip all over you. So Shamsundar said, Chitsukhananda, look at you, you're getting the mango all over you. And Prabhupada immediately corrected him. He said, he is simply enjoying, let him enjoy. Just let him enjoy. I said, oh, thank you. And I was just all over my face, the dhoti, but I was enjoying. Anyway, so. And then the next morning after, when we arrived there, after we had arrived the next morning, we got up around 5:45, just before sunrise. And Prabhupada came into the temple, this little temple room. This is a rustic house. But, so Srila Prabhupada came in, and he knew that all of us had arisen late. So he was very, very serious. Almost, you could say, like angry or very. And as he began the class, he wasn't revealing his mind yet, but by the vibration we could tell that he was like extremely, something was very uptight. So I remember Shamsundar, when he began to read his Sanskrit, he made some mistakes, and Prabhupada said, you're traveling with me for so many months and you're not knowing these verses? So, and then I say, and then we all, after the class, he sort of walked out of the room and went outside to his room, where his quarters. And I thought, oh my God. And he said, then towards the end of the lecture, and I remember he says, why are you getting up late? I know you're traveling, you're tired, but you must be up in the morning. He says, no matter what, you can rest later, but you must be up in the morning. Then he says, Chitsukhananda, is this going on in your temple? Getting up at 6 in the morning? I said, no, Srila Prabhupada. He says, because you must be very careful. So no matter what, you may travel, but you must rise and chant. So we all felt kind of bad, and I specifically, since I was the primary host in these places, I thought, well, we've been 5 days of ecstasy, but now we're getting the nectar of a little chastisement. But I thought, oh no, maybe I've ruined his trip, you know, that he's feeling unhappy and seeing that we're also so fallen. So somehow he walked out, and I came like running to the door, and I just caught him gradually, and then I picked some little jasmine flowers that were up right above a little branch that when he was passing through. And I said, Srila Prabhupada, please take these flowers. And he turned around and he goes, thank you. And he smiled real brightly, and I go, Srila Prabhupada, your appearance of this lion, this angry lion, is gone. So what? He says, I am never angry with any of you. And here we were for an hour, feeling thunderbolts. He says, I'm never angry. He says, only when you fall off the path, my duty is to put you back on. He says, that's all. He says, otherwise, there's no. I said, oh, thank you, Prabhupada. So when I hear his anger is only displayed only from care of a child, just like a parent may say to, don't do that. But Prabhupada is the same way. We were children. We were young. That evening, it had been, it rained all afternoon. Actually, these tropical places, it rains in the afternoon. This was long, very beautifully, rained hard, and then the sun set. And I remember now Nanda Kumar, Shamsundar, Pradyumna, they all sat down, and some of the other devotees, I believe Haihaya was also there, he was there, and I think Rohini Kumar. And we were all watching the sunset. And this was on plateaus. All the devotees were on the lower plateau, and Srila Prabhupada was on a higher plateau, just sitting on this little hill, watching the sunset. And I was sitting next to Srila Prabhupada. This little puppy was next to him. So, and all of a sudden, this chanting was going on very sweetly, but it was like a little far removed from where we were. I could still speak with him, and I noticed the mosquitoes towards the evening were starting to buzz around a bit. And I said, oh no, they're going to get Prabhupada. And I said, geez, I don't mind, you know. And I asked, Srila Prabhupada, are the mosquitoes bothering you? Are they biting you? And he looked at me and he goes, no. I go, gee. And I thought of something very wise to say. I said, Srila Prabhupada, must be because you're a pure devotee, they respect you. And I'm very impure and they're biting me, and that's why they know the difference. And he goes, But he says, but in Calcutta, they make no distinction. And actually, Gurudas came to the other part of the story, that he was sitting in Calcutta temple on the Vyasa-san. And it was the evening, he began his lecture, and all of a sudden the mosquitoes started flying and buzzing and created such a commotion, and he was going like this and like that. He just came and sat within the devotees, and he sat right on the level of devotees, right with the devotees during the class, and he said, just see, they have dethroned me. So the Calcutta mosquitoes were renegades, and the Mexican mosquitoes were very respectful to Srila Prabhupada. They didn't bite him. After being through Mexico, Venezuela, I mentioned that I had gone to Trinidad to help reopen this temple myself, and I gathered the old devotees and brought a couple myself, and we were preaching on the island. And there's another funny story, but it's not my godbrother. But basically, I went there, and I would go give these lectures sometimes at these Hindu temples. And one morning, I gave a small talk, and they had their bhajan, and they gave a talk, and it was like a Hindu society. And after the lecture, this man comes up to me, a Mr. Ricky, and he says, oh, he says, your guru is A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami? He said, yeah. He acted like he knew him. I said, you know him? He said, no. He was writing to me some time ago. And I thought, oh yeah, let me see this one. And he showed me the letter. He was writing to Srila Prabhupada before 1966. This was 1964, 65, before Prabhupada came to America. Prabhupada was thinking, maybe I'll go to Trinidad. It's an island that has many, many Hindu followers. And so this Mr. Ricky was writing on behalf of his society. Prabhupada wrote to their society, and they wrote him back saying that he would have to preach. Anyway, so I saw the letter, and I was quite shocked. And the next time I was anxious, the next time I went to Los Angeles I went up to Srila Prabhupada's quarters, and I spent some time alone with Prabhupada, and I said, Srila Prabhupada, when I went to Trinidad, I saw one of your letters in manhood that you were corresponding to before you ever came to America, so you were going to go to Trinidad first? So he began to smile. He says, yes. He says, I was going there, but this society, I go, yeah, Sanatan Dharma Mahasabha, that's the name of this. Yeah, yes. He says, yes, that's one. He says, they were telling me what I would have to do, how I would have to preach, how I would have to do this, and how I'd have to do that. So, he says, that I could not do. So he was smiling, saying like, they're trying to run my life. He says, no. He says, I will not let them run my life. I will preach the way I want to preach and serve Krishna as the way I see fit. So in this way, he was like telling me, he said, yeah, these people were trying to control me. But it's interesting that Srila Prabhupada was making attempts to come see a lot of devotees. I don't think anyone has ever heard this, that Prabhupada was already in correspondence, in touch with the West, ready to come here. So he was coming. And we were going to be blessed very shortly. I had come to India, and Srila Prabhupada was collecting money for Vrindavan, for Mayapur. And at the time I was not doing so much preaching work, and I thought, well, I've got my family and I'm going to get a little money together to start a farm, and hopefully it'll become successful. Then Prabhupada told me, he says, you want to do a farm? He says, very nice, that's good. And he says, you can take the sannyasi with you, Chaivana. He says, he can work under you. So he was never thinking, this is a grihastha, the sannyasi cannot work under him, or this grihastha. No, he would always make arrangements according to time, place, and circumstance. And for instance, I wanted to help. I figured the way, if I can't help at least making devotees or opening temples right now, maybe I can send you some money. And he says to me, I said, Prabhupada, when I make money from all my projects and things, I'm going to send you money so you can. He says, no, he says, you keep the money. I don't want your money. I want you to have your money. I want you to employ it. I know that you will employ it for Krishna, sir. Not that I want you to. He says, I know wherever you go, you'll try to employ this money for Krishna. I arrived there 12 days before Prabhupada's disappearance. I came to his room, and the devotee said, Chitsukhananda is here, and Prabhupada smiled and said, oh, thank you for coming. Even there he was totally attentive, and oh, Prabhupada. So, I was able to be with him these last few days, and very wonderful. I hate to see him in that condition, but he was just so clean and pure, and his mind was so centered on Krishna and so clear. It was never any question of senility, being an older person, or being very ill. I could actually see that with my eyes. And it's not just because I'm his disciple. It's the truth that his mind was, you can see what he wrote at that time, what he spoke, and what was written. His mind was perfectly clear. Je anilo premadana karuna prachu